In what could only be described as the drunkest game of the afternoon, somehow Arkansas survives. And with that, we got to break down everything we saw in Saturday's performance. Welcome on into the SEC Unfiltered postgame show. We're brought to you by Prize Picks. Use the promo code SECU at prizepicks.com at sign up to get a $50 instant play with your first $5 lineup. I'm Cole Thompson, breaking down everything that we saw at Jordan-Hare Stadium. Arkansas outlast the Tigers 24-14. Real quickly, make sure that you hit the subscribe button down below because this is your source for all things SEC moving forward. Download the podcast version of the show wherever you get your podcast listening systems. Follow us on the social channels, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at SEC Unfiltered. Follow me at Mr. Cole Thompson. That way the back and forth banter doesn't have to reside just between the universe of YouTube. And make sure that you follow us at secunfiltered.com. 24-14 final score, but honestly, if you're Arkansas, you don't feel very confident. You got to win. Congratulations. You marched into a hostile atmosphere and you were able to pull away a massive victory to keep your season alive, currently sitting at 3-1, and now another victory in the likes of conference play. But if you are Auburn, there is a lot that you have to get through. There were more turnovers in this game than a busy Saturday afternoon bakery. There was more penalties and miscues and bad performances than what you see at a slip and slide in the summer. Just an overall ugly, dainty, disgusting game that eventually had to see a winner. And that winner is Arkansas. Simply put, the better quarterback came out on top. Taylor Green was far from perfect in this game. 12 of 27, 151 yards. Did finish with the team high 80 rushing yards. But that doesn't make you feel confident. There were so many mental mistakes, back and forth, turnover after turnover, punt after punt, drive stalling, inconsistent moves by either offense that you never were able to get in the right direction. And that's where you sit if you're Arkansas today. My biggest takeaway from this matchup, there is a clear separation between contending teams in the SEC and pretenders in the SEC. And Auburn, I want to give you the benefit of the doubt. You made a switch on over to Hank Brown. I thought it was the right move. I thought that Payton Thorne, the era of what number one was going to do, was over. But honestly, at this point, he might give you the best shot just to get to bowl eligibility, which at this point feels like a downtrodden year on the Plains going into year two of the Hugh Freeze era. Let's just go back and talk about this game. Overall, very, very lackluster performance from the jump. Missed field goal at the start from Kyle Ramsey. And then we're off to the races. Interception, touchdown, punt, turnover on downs, a fumble, punt, interception. And by the way, we're only at halftime with that many turnovers. Let's go back. Turnover on downs because Hugh Freeze, for some reason, thought, let's go ahead and run a fake punt, try to catch Arkansas off its back burner. Interception, punt, touchdown, interception, field goal, touchdown, turnover on downs, end of game. If you're Arkansas, you outlasted an Auburn team that is fundamentally flawed all over the place. And you know what? Sometimes the voodoo magic that exists down at Jordan-Hare Stadium decides to reap on up from the ashes and find its way onto the field for 4 quarters of what has to be unknown football. That's it. Weird things happen at Jordan-Hare Stadium when matchups seem to reach all-time peaks. Last year, let's go back to the Iron Bowl. Remember how it felt like this was a moment where Payton Thorne and the Tigers were going to get the wool over Nick Saban's eyes? You bring back a guy in Hugh Freeze that has a respect and, more importantly, has an identity to be able to beat up on Nick Saban. Did so twice when he was at Ole Miss. Yet here you are on 4th and 31. Weird things happen. Weird things happen again. Arkansas, turnovers, punts, but still processing massive plays down the field. You got to give credit where credit's due. The explosive plays that did end up happening were major. Jaquindon Jackson with a 1-yard touchdown run after a massive penalty on a pass interference from Kite. You also got to talk about, how about the touchdown play? 3rd and 10, 56-yard pass to Isaiah Satenga. Performance. That's what you got. Absolute dominance, time after time after time when the explosive plays happen. But make no mistake, once Hank Brown came out of the game, 3 turnovers later, second half, after hearing on the broadcast that he said we were going to dominate Arkansas. Well, here comes Payton Thorne. And I can't even be disrespectful. Payton Thorne's interception, not on him. Very minor rookie mistake from Cam Coleman that he will learn from, get better at, and eventually it will grow, and it will be a positive thing for his overall demeanor. But Keandre Lambert-Smith stepped on up, made this thing interesting. Back-to-back touchdown drives, massive 67-yard score. On top of that, you also get a 67-yard play that I didn't realize that was going to happen. Then you get a 10-yard touchdown. You got to feel good. A road win is a road win. That's the one positive that you have if you are Arkansas. And Arkansas at this point now sits at 3-1, with the season still ahead. I'm not saying that they're going to be going to a college football playoff. What I am saying is you can carry this momentum. Go play against Texas A&M next week in Arlington. You guys know this as well as I do. Every single time that these two meet up down in Jerry World, it becomes a must-see spectacle. It becomes a game down to the wire. Yes, absolutely. A&M has owned the competition. But it's not like there was a couple of miscues by both sides that kept both interesting and into the game. So maybe this is what you need exactly if you are Arkansas to be able to carry it. But you got to get better if you are Taylen Green. Taylen Green is basically at this point playing Tecmo Bowl Bo Jackson. It is so much fun to watch. It is so much fun to see him in action. But you just know it's one play away from being a highlight to a miscue. That's what you got when you play with Taylen Green. On top of that, Jaquindon Jackson, got to give credit. Even though he didn't lead the team in rushing, he feels like the best running back in the SEC right now. Consistency on the ground, 22 carries, 2 touchdowns, both inside the red zone. Capitalize, you got to win. And in large part, that's because of what you had in Jaquindon Jackson. Big-time plays from Andrew Armstrong. Big-time plays from Isaac Satenga. Touchdown pass for the year, 56 yards. You'll take that if you're Arkansas. But let's talk about Auburn for a minute. Auburn at this point is at the crossroads of no return. Because here's the bottom line. You could shake it up however you want. Maybe throw out a Holden Griner. Maybe bring back Hank Brown. Trust that Payton Thorne is going to be the guy. It doesn't matter. You know, going into next year, the main asset that you're going to have to address is getting a transfer portal quarterback. It has to be done. You know that the direction that right now you're going in underneath Payton Thorne is not the right one. You know that Hank Brown is able to win against minuscule competition, kind of like a guy that currently is wearing number 1 and maybe is the best option for QB1. And Holden Griner, we didn't even get to see him play. So how do we know that he's not the guy? And more importantly, why do we think that he is? If he wasn't good enough to compete with the two that got into the game, are we going to see him play next time? The bottom line when you look at Auburn at this point, they're not a quarterback away. So I completely understand and save the droll about not going into the portal to bring in a quarterback. The pricing that it would have cost to get one of the top tier names was not going to do anything to get you to a college football playoff. Would it have gotten you to maybe an 8-win season? Perhaps. Would it maybe have gotten you to at least a better bowl game and play the spoiler role? Maybe. But you weren't a quarterback away from ever being in conversation of being a playoff team. The defense was flawed. You never made adjustments in the second half by rushing 3. It felt like there was miscue after miscue. When the explosive plays happened, you only had yourself to blame. And yes, you got a couple turnovers, but one of the picks by Taylen Green was on a tip ball at the line of scrimmage. So it's not like you can say at this point it was an overall great defensive battle. The problem is that when you look at bad football sometimes being played, you at least want to be entertained. Go back and see what was going on down at Stark Vegas today. It's a Florida team that knows that the direction that they're going in is probably turning a new era underneath the end of the Billy Napier times, but at least they made things fun. You saw explosive play. You watched as both quarterbacks were wheeling and dealing. You felt confident. And even for a team like Mississippi State, the problems are solvable. I don't know if the problems are solvable for either one of these squads when it comes to culture, when it comes to baseline, when it comes to consistency. Certainly, I don't think that right now you feel that great if you're Arkansas in terms of how sloppy a performance it was. But again, a win is a win. So you're going to take that, you're going to run it back home to Fayetteville, and you're going to feel that confidence going into next week when you got to play against a Texas A&M squad that we don't know who's their starting quarterback. We don't know what direction their offense is going in currently. And we don't know if last week's performance will be sustainable against Bowling Green later tonight. That at least you have in your back pocket. If you're Auburn, what do you say at this point? You don't have a great offensive line. Your run game was anemic at best. You rushed for less than 150 yards on the day. Jarquez Hunter only had 12 carries. Damari Alston had a fumble. You don't feel good. If you're Auburn at this point, you know that next season is a crucial year. Everyone talks about year 3 in the world of college football. Year 3 is where it all has to come together. Well, year 3 for a team like Auburn has got to be the year where they target a quarterback. Because if you have the personnel, I don't doubt that at all. You're going to see growth. You're going to see a maturation when it comes to Cam Coleman, Perry Thompson, Malcolm Simmons. You're going to get better at the tight end position, whether it be via the portal or on the recruiting aspect. You're going to add in a player to replace Fairweather. Your offensive line will improve. I'm not saying that you're going to add in a premier player via the portal or that a 5-star is going to be a plug-and-play addition at left tackle. But you will get better at those spots. Next season is where you have to target the quarterback. Because at this point, you know that Hank Brown does not feel like the option. Payton Thorne is one throw away from giving you a pick 6 and a heart attack. And I don't know what's happening with Holden Griner. Leave your comments down below. Let's go ahead and answer some questions. Chris Meadows, hashtag WooPigSuey, WooPig indeed. Kevin Norton, road win wasn't pretty for the offense. No, it was not. But a win is a win. You're right. A win is a win. If you are Arkansas today, you feel very good about the direction that you're going in, at least in terms of you have something on offense. I don't know what. I don't know how consistent you feel. I don't know how you feel like this is going to get that much better, but it will at least keep things interesting against other teams that maybe are at your level. Perhaps at Texas A&M. Perhaps you're able to hold your own at home against LSU. Definitely Mississippi State, Louisiana Tech. If you're watching what's going on right now out right now at Farote Field and Como, you definitely feel like that you can hold your own against Missouri. Taylen Green, I've said this all offseason, is worth the price of admission. Watching him play football is a heart attack and heartbreak, and also it is the exact endorphins that you need to catapult you to success. You love everything about what Taylen Green brings when everything is clicking. When things are going south, it is an unpretty sight. Throw a TVMA logo right up there and look away, kids, because you're not going to want to see how this thing unfolds. There is at least life with Arkansas. I'm not saying it's good life. I'm not saying that's going to not end up being sloppy, that it won't end up being a problem at times, that it may not cost you a game. But there's at least life there. You can't say the same thing about Auburn right now. Auburn constantly shot itself in the foot. They never made any adjustments outside of switching out Hank Brown after 3 interceptions for Payton Thorne, who threw 4 interceptions against Cal. And it's very clear that the quarterback position that you have currently is only going to work with the guys that currently reside on staff against lesser tier competition. You don't have lesser tier competition. That part's over. That ship has sailed. You got one more game that you can probably feel good about yourself, and it's not Vanderbilt. It's Louisiana Monroe. And you'll get a very clear indication about who they are tonight when they play against Texas. And of course, you know what Texas is. You know what Texas is supposed to be. If you look back at this game, and you look back at the other game today, and even if you look back at Vanderbilt and Missouri, right now there's a clear indication of who are the contenders, who are the pretenders, and who are the spoilers in the SEC. Vanderbilt feels like a spoiler. Arkansas at this point maybe feels like a spoiler. They can easily hold their own against lesser competition and make sure that a team doesn't go to a bowl game. Against maybe a roster like Texas, because if Texas finds a way to fumble the bag late in the season, they'll be able to knock them out of first place in the SEC. They'll spoil their opportunity for year one to go to the SEC championship. But there is a clear separation when it comes to the front runners in the SEC and the bottom dwellers in the SEC. Performances like you saw today out on the Plains, Jordan-Hare Stadium, one of the most toxic, hostile, wonderful atmospheres in college football. By the fourth quarter, it was a droll silence because of all the energy had been sucked out of that stadium. That's what you saw today. That's what you saw from Auburn. That's what you saw from a team like Arkansas. The difference is that Arkansas can at least make things entertaining. A couple of deep shots down the field. If you're looking at a team like Auburn, you got a couple big plays. That's all you get per game. You better strike. And you better hope that the defense finds a way to crumble. That's where you're at right now. Vandy may find a way to beat Mizzou. Yep, you're right, Midwest picker. You're 100% right. There's a very good shot that the way that Missouri's playing today, they don't have a chance of coming back and getting a win. If you're Missouri, you're just trying to at least outlast Vanderbilt. And you know what? That's the way how I felt about Arkansas today. You find a way to get up. You find a way to get an early lead, 7-0. It becomes 7-7. You get another touchdown. At that point, you're just playing, let's outlast them. Let's get back on the flight. Let's look at the tape. Let's make sure that we make the right adjustments next week before we head on down to Jerry World. That's where we're at. That's what you do. And that's the way I think Missouri is acting right now. Find a way to survive, advance, make sure that we don't have an L next to our name so we can stay in the hunt for a college football playoff. Arkansas is not going to a playoff, but they sure as hell right now look like a team that can spoil an opportunity. When things are looking promising, at least they're looking promising. I don't know what you do at this point if you are Auburn in terms of the quarterback position. I don't know what you do when it comes to the offensive line. There are so many faults. We had Cole Kublik on earlier this week talking about the offensive lines and how many times you're getting new players to join into the mix simply because of the transfer portal. And because if you don't have the right necessary adjustments to be able to build that relationship, it ends up hurting the entire offense. He's not wrong. Look at the names that are currently on Auburn's offensive line and tell me that you feel confident in the direction that they're going in for the remainder of the season. We're not even through the month of September, and it feels like it doesn't matter who's playing quarterback. They have one read or they got to tuck and run. And maybe that's why you feel better about Payton Thorne, because of even when he's getting corralled, he can at least utilize his legs to keep a drive alive. Any bit of positivity. The defensive line looks awful at times. The fact that you weren't able to get any more than 3 rushers up the middle against Taylon Green, how many times he was able to turn a 3rd and long into a fresh set of downs, it's concerning. It's very concerning, because if that's not the only team that Auburn's going to play this year that has mobility. They got Jackson Arnold. They also got to go up against Carson Beck that knows how to utilize his legs. Brock Vandagriff. Guess what? You're going to welcome back in Diego Pavia. Remember what happened last year? That's what it is. There's pieces. Right now, you feel like when you're talking about Auburn's offense that there are pieces. You got the wheels, you got the steering wheel, you got the pedal, but you don't have the engine. You don't have the doors. You don't have the frame of the car. You have pieces that when things are humming, it can go. But right now, it doesn't feel that way. Right now, it doesn't even feel close to being that way. And the big problem is that regardless of who you have a quarterback, you have a young cast of wide receivers that you have to make sure stay happy so that way they stick around with the program for the long term. That way they stick around internally past 2024. Because the last thing you want to do is see players like Cam Coleman and Perry Thompson, 2 receivers that might end up being household names in the NFL. And more importantly, 2 of the most important recruits that have come through the Plains in the last 2 decades walk into the transfer portal. Not because if they want to play elsewhere, but because if they realize that there is no future for them to build on their success moving forward. That's where you are if you're Auburn at this point. Auburn, I don't know where you go. You're sitting at 2-2. More importantly, you're currently sitting with no direction at quarterback. You're sitting with question marks in your secondary, question marks at your defensive front, question marks on your offensive line, question marks when it comes to your overall running back play outside of Jarquez Hunter, which, by the way, why aren't you utilizing him more? 12 carries in a game where you realize that you have 3 turnovers? You don't feel like at that point it's time to maybe trust what you got on the ground? I don't know what to say. It felt like a sloppy overall performance. If you're sitting here this morning, or I guess this evening, feeling like Arkansas got a win because they were the better team, I'm not sure you're wrong. I'm also not sure you're right. It more so felt like Arkansas was able to capitalize on the big explosive plays when needed, and they walked away with a dub. Not an easy dub. Not a dub that they're going to feel proud of watching the film over. Not a dub that you go back and say, this is Arkansas football. But one that you say, we got to win. Let's go ahead and advance. If you're Auburn, you get a week to go ahead and get ready because Oklahoma comes to town. And afterwards, it gets tough. This was your home schedule. Keep this in mind. This was you having the home field environment of Jordan-Hare Stadium in your back, on your side, to be able to create an atmosphere that puts pressure on underwhelming teams. Cal, Arkansas, potentially Oklahoma, depending on how they look tonight against Tennessee in their first SEC matchup. And currently you're sitting at 2-2, and it does not get easier. Georgia, Missouri, say what you want about them, how they've looked. Their defense still has been able to corral Diego Pavia into making mistakes. At Kentucky, they brought a team in Georgia down to the wire. Defensively, they got the capabilities of holding their own against you. All on the road. And then you welcome back Diego Pavia. And what happened last time that he showed up here? I'm just saying, when you look at this Auburn team, there are more flaws than just the quarterback. So you can't blame simply Payton Thorne for being the only reason why you're bad. Your defensive front was bad. Your secondary allowed far too many explosive plays down the field. You also weren't able to get anything established on the ground. Turnover after punt. The offensive line wasn't able to open up creases. It's more than just a quarterback away for those down on the Plains. You have issues that you have to continue to fix. And I don't think it is solvable this year. I think at this point, you're looking forward to hopefully getting to a bowl game, convincing players why Auburn is the right place to be, work that recruiting trail to your favor, finish with a top 5 class, and then attack the transfer portal. If you want to follow a method, go look at what Miami did this past offseason. That's a perfect example if you are Auburn right now. They went out, they established themselves on the recruiting trail. They brought in the right pieces on the offensive line. They established a culture on what they were looking for internally for types of players. And at the very end, they then attacked. Get a number 1 wide receiver, go ahead and get a linebacker, build up your defensive line with an edge rusher, a defensive tackle, and swing big for a running back and a quarterback. Look at where they are now. They feel like a team that currently is not only going to run away with the ACC title, they're one of the only teams outside of the Big Ten and the SEC that probably has a shot of hoisting up the natty. That's what you have to do if you're Auburn next year. Continue to go build the recruiting trail in your favor. Keep guys like you have on the foundation, guys like Cam Coleman, guys like Malcolm Simmons, guys like Perry Thompson. Have them at your disposal. Continue to get the right pieces in on the offensive and defensive line, and then add in those last few drops in the portal. And you got to get a quarterback. Arkansas, it's sloppy. It's a game that you're going to have to rewind out of your head, but a win's a win. And in a hostile environment such as Jordan-Hare Stadium, you can feel confident. You can feel confident moving into the next week against Texas A&M in Arlington. We know how that game goes. And if you're Arkansas, you got 6 days to put this one behind you and get ready for Oklahoma. Because after that, that's where the real challenge begins. Road matchups against a team like Georgia, like Missouri, like Kentucky, you won't have the fan base backing you up in your own end zone when you're getting down to the wire. They'll be the ones trying to feast at you. Let me know in the comment section down below, what were your overall thoughts of this game? Make sure that you like, rate, review, subscribe. Follow us on the social channels, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, at SEC Unfiltered. Download the podcast version of the show and check out all of our great work found at secunfiltered.com. I'll be back later tonight following Tennessee versus Oklahoma. Who knows how that game's going to go down, but make sure you go ahead and follow us here. I'm Cole Thompson. Later.